Do you really need to move to heal? In this video, I'm going to talk about a lot of questions around location and the magnetism debacle, and a lot of questions based on whether or not you really do need to move to heal that I got from the Dr. Jack Cruz podcast here on YouTube. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Emanuela Urbani. I'm a health and nutrition practitioner, and I've helped over 100 men and women discover what optimal health really feels like for them. I teach coaches, nutritionists, naturopaths, and practitioners on the basics of how to incorporate quantum biology in their own practice. I run a group called Control Your Period, where I help women with really bad periods, endometriosis, adenomyosis, and the like achieve relief through a nature first biophysics based strategy. And I help clients one-on-one through a high level, high touch point, individualized coaching program. And of course, I help you get from 0 to 100 and implement all of these strategies through my group program on school called Quantum Thrive. I always appreciate a subscribe, a like, a comment. I love to hear your thoughts, and I love that you are here watching this video. So enough about me, let's get on with it. Let me first explain magnetism and understanding optimal magnetic fields in the earth and understanding measurements that are currently out there today to make sense. In the episode in my podcast that I did with Dr. Jack Cruz, he talked a lot about magnetism and its influence on health in a variety of different ways, and specifically location as well. And I got a ton of comments and questions on the topic that I'm covering today. I, in no way, shape, or form, claim to have an in-depth and technical understanding in any way like Dr. Jack Cruz. In this video, I'm going to break it down to you simply and help you apply it in a way that makes sense and answers the questions that are brimming in your mind. So let's just understand the magnetic field of the earth for a moment here and know that when you're looking at data, there's a few different types of data. There's maps of the earth's magnetic field that are mathematical estimations, which means they've taken pictures from satellites and then they have extrapolated using math the data on where they think the earth's magnetic field is today based on satellite data that was taken years ago. There's also new satellite data that was taken very, very recently. I believe it was end of 2025 or early 2026. I'm not sure exactly, so don't quote me on that one, but super, super recent. And there's different types of imaging and modeling that shows different aspects of the magnetic field. It's a multifaceted issue. And the thing is that when you're measuring the magnetic field from space, remember that you can only capture so much because the magnetic field proximity really matters. And what you're actually capturing from space has more to do with things like there's something called the South Atlantic anomaly, which is this thing in the South Atlantic Ocean. And let's think of it as like a hole in the magnetic field where you have like a big massive drop that is kind of expanding. And then every planet with life on it has a magnetosphere, which kind of protects the Earth from things like, asteroids hitting, or the sun has these like solar storms where it can kind of like, let's say, eject a beam of light, and the chances of that hitting the earth increase when the protection of this magnetosphere decreases. So the earth has its own innate magnetic field. And there's certain areas on the earth that have a better magnetic field, and there's certain factors to consider, like not just things that can be captured from space, like increasing anomalies of, say, this SAA, which whatever is like this, imagine the circular hole, anything around that circular hole is going to suffer. And this can only be captured from space. Whereas using like a local probe to measure the magnetic field of where you are needs to be corroborated with the data that we can see from there. And for example, the movement of magnetic north from northern Canada to Siberia, in that direction, that's also something that has to be taken into consideration. So you have to marry the data. There's also we know from geology, and the reason why we know that the Earth's poles have flipped is because we have rocks or stones in the Earth that are magnetically oriented to magnetic north. So you have it pointing to wherever magnetic north was at the time when the rock was forming, and as the rock hardened, and then magnetic north became, let's call it, stamped on the rock, and it is forever pointing to where magnetic north used to be. This is how we know that the Earth's, again, poles have flipped before in history. So when you have, let's call it, memory of these rocks, and let's say if you meant like really acidic water, water with vinegar and water with baking soda, it goes psh, and then you get something more in the middle. And it can be the same thing with the magnetic field, where if you have a lot of stones or rocks or structured that were oriented to an old orientation, or that hold a different memory than the one that's underneath the earth at the moment where that is, they can cancel each other out or weaken each other. So that's something to consider when you're looking at this kind of data. And then, of course, there is things that will always be better when it comes to magnetic field, and that would be like an active volcano would be your best, or an active volcanic lake, really active volcanic activity where there is actual data of any kind showing that it's currently active right this second, because there's volcanoes that say are still considered active, but with the data that they are collecting on them, they're actually not active right now. So you want that really active volcano. And this is something that I always tell my clients when they're planning a vacation. Not only do they want something with really good sun, but they want to pick a spot with a really good magnetic field so they can maximize that time that they're enjoying and relaxing and, having a vacation, essentially, especially when you live somewhere like where I do, or in most of the US, or, in Australia or the UK. And to a lesser degree, other examples of having a better magnetic field to a certain extent would be like things like cenotes, hot springs, cold springs, geysers, things like that show that kind of activity. And again, this is not a hard and fast rule. There are some that say are no longer active, so they would be less impactful, and some that are more impactful, and other things to consider. But those are easy and simple ones. Now, in the comments from the Dr. Cruz podcast, a lot of people, and I've heard this just so many times in general, were like, well, what do we do back in the day when we had humans at the poles, when we had humans all over the world? And there's a couple things to that. First of all, cold is definitely nature's antidote to an absence of a strong summer sun. Not just because of the way it affects light and chaos and order in your body, but also because it increases your magnetic sensitivity, let's call it that. And it increases oxygen tension in your body. And this is important because we want to be the most sensitive to magnetic field, especially when the magnetic field is weaker. The more sensitive you are, the more data you can collect to it. As humans, we are extremely tied to the Earth's magnetic field. And of course, there's no randomized controlled clinical trial on this. First of all, nobody would ever fund that study, and I don't even like RCTs, but also it would be impossible to design. But there is lots of data that we understand that the magnetic field, artificial magnetic fields, have such a massive impact on clocks, your circadian signaling hormones. We have a lot of data on that. And people who are electrohypersensitive often, not all the time, but very, very often, tend to be the most sensitive to artificial magnetic field. And there is some interesting data showing that natural magnetic fluctuations trigger hospitalizations, episodes, and problems in people with issues like bipolar disease, depression, severe anxiety, schizophrenia, and the like. By and large, practitioners in the quantum biology space ignore the magnetism angle because it's just so inconvenient and it's the most unpleasant one to discuss. And they're doing a disservice to you. And if you look at their stack, their protocol, their habits they do on a day-to-day basis, you will notice the sheer number of things that they need to use in order to maintain their health. And to be clear, I'm no different. The difference is that I'm going to tell you what gadgets I need here in Canada, whereas what gadgets I need when I'm in El Salvador visiting my mom. This is a critical factor, is that we all make choices, but I firmly believe that we should be making choices while understanding all of the implications. It's called informed consent, which unfortunately isn't even practiced in this world, I find. So, do you really need to move to heal? Let's address that. It depends on how sick you are, how many gains you actually want to achieve, and what you are or are not willing to give up, and how many protocols do you want to be dependent on. So you can't absolutely heal in a suboptimal environment, but your healing will have a cap in many scenarios. And depending on the situation, if your issue is very severe, this is where, if you've spoken to me as a potential client or are a client of mine with a serious multiple issue, you know that I require you to plan a very long extended vacation if you are living in a suboptimal environment, or to plan a move. Because otherwise, you're just wasting your money on me. Because of how I help my clients, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not prescribing anything. I want you to get the value of what I am offering and more than what you spend in your investment. I want you to get way more and above of what you expected for your health results. And there are certain ways in which that does and does not make sense, hence my conditions. But for the average person with the average issues, you can heal where you are by making certain changes. Like if you tell me, I live under the hydro corridor, which are those, massive power line structures that we see in North America, then I'm sorry, but you're going to have to move. And it doesn't mean that you have to move country or states, but you're going to have to move outside of underneath the power corridor. If you tell me you live next door neighbor to a transformer station, again, I'm sorry, you're going to have to move. Doesn't mean you have to move provinces or states, but it does mean you have to move houses. So when I say, do you need to move to heal? In this video, I'm specifically referencing, do you need to make a big move? Multiple states, multiple provinces, countries, whatever. Okay. Also, you have to understand what it is that you want and what you will not or will give up. For example, for myself, I have a long history of health issues, especially around my periods, around my hormonal health, and a lot of other things. And what I'm not willing to do is I'm never willing to experience the pain and the amount of suffering physically that I did prior to understand this. I'm never willing to go down that route again. I am okay uprooting my life and my family's lives and taking a house somewhere else if it means that due to the changing environment around me where I currently live, if I'm experiencing even a small reoccurrence in certain symptoms that I can't fix to my satisfaction without extensive supplementation, hormone replacement therapy, etc., I'm willing to move. But that may not be you. You may say, I have my family established here. I'm only willing to be X amount of distance away from them. And I'm okay having to take certain things. I'm okay having a certain amount of risk from continuing to live here depending on my individual situation. I'm okay with that. I'm making this choice. Let me give you a very simple way to think of that. I don't eat bananas, I don't eat mangoes, I don't eat pineapples in Canada because they don't grow here. I'm very particular about that, especially with high sugar foods. Yes, I eat avocados, but they are high fat, so I don't really worry about them. But if I'm going out on a date with my husband and we're going to my favorite restaurant that serves ceviche with mango, for example. I'm going to eat it, enjoy it, and not think twice about it. I'm making a choice. I want to seek pleasure and enjoyment in my life. And I understand where my limitations lie, what I am and am not willing to give up. And I'm not willing to give up enjoying a certain food on a date night once in a while. And so I still do it. Maybe you are willing to give up that, but you're not willing to give up other things, right? See what I'm saying here? We have to understand our choices and limitations in life. And once you have those outlined, what you need to do to heal becomes a lot more clear. Now, let me tell you all the gadgets that I need to sustain a certain level of health here in Canada versus in El Salvador. For myself, prior to moving in a temporary space where it's one of those where you just really got to move house, never mind anything else, I was able to achieve a massive resolution of all my health problems with a few minor exceptions. For example, I used small doses of a bioidentical progesterone in certain situations as needed to ensure that I lived a pain-free and extremely healthy life. And I also used certain gadgets. In the winter, I use an EMR tack. I like their Krypton Mini, especially for tanning the pelvis and the breasts for better hormone function. I found that to be extremely valuable. I am a big fan of the Magnetico for situations like this. And if you've been watching my YouTube video, you'll know that I recently started drinking deuterium depleted water. So, here in Canada, what I need would be deuterium depleted water, a Magnetico sleep pad, an EMR tack device. See, the one I have is a simple red one in the background. For the winter, I would need to supplement with a lot of cold therapy. I do cold therapy all year round, but I do a lot more of it in the winter. A lot colder, a lot longer times at colder temperatures. I need to be extremely strict with how I eat. I need to use certain tools to help my body eliminate and break deuterium bonds. I have a vibration plate that I use. I go for regular grounded walks, which of course everybody should do everywhere. But I hope that gives you an example of what I need. If I don't drink the deuterium depleted water, my teeth get a lot yellower. If I don't use my red, infrared, and blue light device to whiten my teeth, my teeth get kind of gross. If I don't use my deodorant, my salt soaps on a regular basis, I smell. If I don't drink a ton of water, drink my deuterium depleted water, and pop essential oil mint drops, my breath can not always be the greatest. However, when I go to El Salvador, I don't need my progesterone. I don't need my deuterium depleted water. I don't need to be extremely strict. I don't need any kind of other gadgets. I definitely don't need my EMR tech device. And I don't need to wear deodorant. And I don't need anything. I don't smell. My breath doesn't smell. My sweat doesn't smell. My hair, I don't need the frankincense. I did a video on the hair update, right? I don't need the frankincense, and I have amazing hair that doesn't shed, even if I don't use it at all. There's so many things I don't need when I'm there. And that's because of the massive difference in environment between here where I am and when I am there. And that is a difference that you must understand. If you tell me, Emanuela, I know what I want. I want where I am. I love my family. I love my life. All gadget out. I'm okay with hitting ceiling. Just tell me everything I can do to feel better. Okay. Now, if you tell me you've got autoimmune disease, multiple cancer diagnoses, I'm going to say, well, you can do it on your own dime, but don't pay me, right? But this is what I'm trying to say. That you need to change your physical environment when you're in immediate danger of your physical house. That is a small change. It may require selling your house, finding a new place to rent, whatever, right? And then you may need a list of gadgets, supplements, tools, fancy smancy stuff to keep you at the level of health that you want where you are if you don't move. And taking advantage of really nice environments doesn't just mean moving there. It can also mean vacationing there. It can also mean setting up a longer sabbatical or sick leave to spend away so you can achieve a certain amount of healing. Every time I go back, I take something home with me that doesn't leave. I take a benefit that I don't lose when I come back. So it's not like you can go and then just like as soon as you come back, you're back to square one. I haven't been back at square one ever since my first trip there. The benefits have lasted still then. Now, if I had, I don't know, like I could theoretically lose those benefits if I really screw the pooch on this or, never take those breaks and go there or whatever it is, right? There's so many ways this can go. Anyways, this is a really long video, but I really wanted to break it down for you and I really hope it was helpful. Please tell me your thoughts. Tell me your comments. Tell me how you think this might apply to you, how it was helpful. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you on the next one.